is like today, and we're going to stroll into the future, how it will look like coming up with all these new technologies in the industry. So I'm joined here today with Adam, and he has an extensive history in the industry, has a lot of experience. So Adam, why don't you take us down memory lane?
Thanks, Chris. I apologise, I've lost my voice today all day, so I hope everybody can actually understand what I'm saying. So yeah, I've been working in the maritime IT industry for nearly 20 years, I would say. And I remember first just starting out, 19 years old, running around my scooter. And on board, all I remember us having was a comms PC and a nav PC. And the comms PC would dial up to the internet using a Fleet 55 or Fleet 77, something like that. It was just the same way that you'd have at home when you'd dial up to the internet after 6 o'clock because a phone call would be cheaper. And it would get online and it would put on a couple of emails and maybe get a weather update, and that was it. There wasn't anything else. Effectively,
back then there was no IT infrastructures in place, and there was no internet to speak about, realistically.
No, not at all. It was just a secondary function. It wasn't available to the guests. It wasn't really available to the crew. It was just there on a PC in the corner.
Then effectively we saw the first iteration of internet. Basically we saw 3G being deployed and the first real versions of VSAT. How did that change the life on board?
Well, it was very much akin to how we first got ADSL on land, basically. Suddenly the yacht would find itself with a relatively fast, always on, stable source of internet. And this gave rise to all of the systems inside the yacht. So suddenly from this, you ended up having dedicated crew workstations, you had file servers on board, email servers.
So this was the real first version of what we see today.
Yeah, and obviously you had a network here. And this was probably circa early mid-2000s. And suddenly you had a network to talk to all of this stuff. And around the same time is when you started seeing AV systems starting to use the network as well. So this would have been the first integration of moving away from the infrared remote controls over to a tablet.
So no more DVD players on HD.
Yeah, exactly. You get your AV media library and all connected to this one net. The one point I want to make here is you can look at all of these systems, you can think about it like all of these systems inside the boat kind of encompassed in this shell, and everything inside the boat could talk to everything inside the boat within this shell, and then coming out of this shell was this little string, and the string was the internet connection. And as a network engineer, you have to be really careful with who could use that string and how much of it they could use, and making sure that whatever you did, everything inside would still work if the string broke.
So as products developed and matured inside the yacht, then we saw the next iteration, which was 4G, which I would say is the first real good internet on board. And again, VSAT has improved by then, and it's now suddenly we've got decent internet coming on board. How did that change?
Yeah, so I'm thinking back to I think it's like circa 2012, 2013, and you started seeing decent speeds on VSAT, good speeds on 4G, but it didn't really fundamentally change what you were doing on board. You just had more of the same. I think the biggest change I remember seeing around that time was yachts very quickly realizing that they needed control, and it was all about the control. And this is where we really start to see the first use of VLANs, for example. Suddenly we're not all inside the same network. Suddenly there's a dedicated crew network, a guest network, an owner network. You have the products and technologies on board to really drill down into that internet source and control who gets in, what they can access, etc. So that ecosystem, basically, it wasn't a massive shift, but it evolved, it matured in that time.
It also introduced the very first basic WAN orchestration, where you can have a particular service go to a particular destination. In terms like crew gets the 4G, owner gets the VSAT, and that type of advancements. But again, it was just a better version of what already existed.
Yeah.
Then we come to a more present day where we've seen 5G being deployed at a relatively rapid pace. We've seen all coasts being deployed, most of the world is already covered, and recently, I mean, just this year, everyone is talking about one thing. It's almost
The word shall be named.
and we send the horsemen to tell the village people that there's internet on board. So now that we're in today's present and seeing 5G and layers being deployed, how are we envisioning this being a success?
For me, that is the real big question now in terms of, okay, now yachts have access to high speed, always on, low latency internet connections. And is that going to give rise now to another shift in more of the same? Or are we looking at like the start of a paradigm shift in what we can do on board, how we do it, and what we need to do that with? And that's the big question.
So, effectively we can say that for the very first time in the maritime industry, history is repeating itself. What I refer to is, we had this low latency, high speed, in land-based operations in offices and corporate environments almost 10 years ago when fiber was introduced, when we didn't have ADSL anymore. So now all of a sudden, this always on, really fast, low latency internet was available, everything started to shift into the cloud, more online services, started to see the demise of less hardware on site and more stuff on the cloud. Are we going to see the same shift in the maritime industry, or do we need to take our own path and develop our own future?
I see a little bit of both. I absolutely think that what's going to happen in the future is things on the boat are going to start moving to the cloud. They already have. We no longer really have onboard email servers, for example. That's all gone cloud-based. And as yachts more and more started to really utilise these high-speed, low-latency connections, as they mature in themselves and as they trust them more, things like onboard file servers are I think, going to go. Onboard AV media libraries might go the same way as well. We already do most of it by streaming. So if we can really trust that the internet's there, then I don't see any issue with it.
That's a very good point. And one of the things that people in offices don't do is do a random speed test every other hour just to check if the internet is still there. We take it for granted. So the yachting industry has to get to the point where it trusts the internet sources enough not to do a speed test every other hour. And that only can happen when you have a really good infrastructure which is resilient, redundant, and it's basically the heartbeat of the yacht.
I mean, what I see personally is I see a reduction in complexity when it comes to the onboard IT systems, the need for servers on board, or multiple complicated servers on board. I see all of that reducing as those services are migrated out to the cloud. But at the same time, I see internal networking complexity increase. Because as you push more and more, and you know, going back to that shell I was speaking about before, that shell is basically broken. And we're taking services that were primarily on board only, we're shifting them off. And as that happens, I see that the need for intelligent, resilient networking will fundamentally increase, as that will be the main outcome of all of this.
So, while we're on this topic, this might be a bit of a controversial question here. With the shift of more cloud services and more online services coming on board in less complex environments, most of the servers being on board, is the role of an IT engineer or an ETO going to be the same, or will we see shift in resources and skill sets?
It definitely won't be the same, but that's not to say that it will be any less important, I don't think. I think it will be even more important. And what's going to happen is, at the moment, that ETO, IT engineer, is responsible for looking after complicated on-board server systems, which I don't think are going to be there. But he is going to still be required to monitor, maintain, and keep that on-board network working at peak efficiency, but at the same time is still going to be responsible for all of the cloud infrastructure now as well. And that brings me to an important point regarding the security around all of this.
So this is another good point, security. So one of the things that most of these manufacturers are doing, and These are not something that we are developing or the companies are developing, but most of these big brands like Microsoft, Google, they all require a certain level of security. One of them is two-factor authentication, which is already a pain to most of us, but imagine someone on board which is kind of doing rotation. So now he sets up his Office 365 on his phone to set up two-factor authentication, and now he's off the boat. How would one manage a situation like this?
I mean, I've seen it all the time. It is quite common. Somebody will go up and set up an email account, so put two-factor authentication on it, and then that phone gets lost or moved, or he's gone on rotation, and you can't get into it. And I think that's not really about technology. That's about us learning to operate that technology and coming to understand and expect what that's going to mean. So I think in many ways, with regards to that, we're going to have to kind of shift our thinking into a bit more of a corporate world. So what I mean by that is, the captain is going to get issued a company laptop and a company mobile phone, which handles that information, and then he doesn't take that phone home with him. He hands that over to his rotational partner.
To address these situations like two-factor authentication. And of course, we need to look a little bit further ahead now. So a lot of people are obviously stumbling upon and focused on these layer technologies and trying to monetize them, see how much money we can make out of the same resource. The thing is that these systems are just enablers. They are enablers for the bigger picture. IT will evolve to parallels of multiple magnitudes, and we need to start learning of all these services that are going to be introduced into the world of maritime for the very first time.
Yeah, and I honestly don't have the answers to all of this in the sense of, it used to be in the past that boats wanted an email system. So they'd go out and find a company which was competent in that technology. And that company would come on and put an email server on board, set it all up, and then be part of managing and monitoring it, etc. Nowadays, you can literally just go online. You can go online, type in an email address and a password, and that's it, your emails are done. So in one way, the shore-based companies kind of lost out on that monetary value because they no longer really needed to do that bit. But on the other hand, I think a lot of what's missing there is that the value of what land-based companies will give to boats around that thing. Because, okay, he's gone off and he's done all of that, but that email system's not backed up. There's very little anti-phishing going on, there's very little anti-spam going on, there's very little auditing going on. So as that shell is broken and as things move up into cloud, we're going to need to adapt to provide services around those things.
These are very good points. Most of these products are underestimated because it's relatively easy. It's next, finish. But most of these services will require additional resources to make it a complete system, and including backups and anti-phishing. And these are all modules to connect to your one product. Another thing as well, which is kind of on everybody's lips, or sorry, I don't find that the correct word, but it's the firewall. So everybody have seen a firewall, so most of them are red boxes, blue box, black box. But one of the things that is going to change in this particular unit, at the moment, this unit is the head router, the thing in charge, we're orchestrating everything through it. In the future, that firewall needs to be untouched. It has to be solidified, protected, and untouched. If you want to change basically where orchestration, you do it on a separate unit. Why? Because that firewall will need to talk to a cloud firewall, which is protecting those, because you're not in the shell anymore. You're now with all these little bubbles everywhere, so you need to kind of have a bigger perimeter covering a wider spectrum, not just that yacht.
Yeah, I mean, as you kind of move all of your stuff onto the cloud, you're going to have to start protecting those individual elements, and one design that you're thinking about there could be with regards to cloud-based networking. And in that regard, as I said before, the onboard complexity of the IT systems lowers the onboard complexity of the networking systems evolves. And yeah, I mean, once you get to the point where you'll just have an internet connection, and it's there today, it's there tomorrow, it's 100 meg today, it's 100 meg tomorrow, that whole WAN selection side of things, apart from some failover, it's gone.
I don't know if we have enough more time. We we can go to a Q&A. This is a podcast, so it's an open discussion. It's not scripted or anything. So if you have any questions or you want to jump in with the conversation, please do so. I think we've got about 5 minutes left on this. So if anyone has any questions or want to ask any more complex questions, feel free to do so. I think we're that clear. Okay.
Wait, fine.
We've got one.
I just wondered, you know, a lot of boats using Curio.
Yeah.
Do you see anything future, either from Curio or another sort of magic box coming out? Or do you think Curio is still, well, you see
The magic box.
Well, we got the magic cyber box, which is no, but do you see
That's a really good question. So the Curio system as we know it today is fundamentally the Curio system that we've seen for the last 10 years has not gone through great amounts of innovation. That said, and this is my personal opinion here, that said, at the moment, I believe it still remains the product which allows a yacht to have the greatest amount of control and visibility on their network in the easiest way possible. Now, if you take a current Curio, current hardware generation, the maximum thinking speed of that Curio with all bells and whistles going on is about 900 megs. That's how fast it can think doing everything. Now, if you offload all of the internal network traffic and you take that away from the Curio and you put that out in the switches and you just leave the Curio doing the internet, I think that's still more than fast enough to cope with what we're doing today. It would be nice, of course, to see the Curios come out with new stuff and you know, a bit of a refresh. But until we're really at the point now of what I just said of that's the internet, it's there, it'll be there tomorrow, don't worry about it. We no longer have to look at, you know, okay, it's Bob on the True Network on his iPad using YouTube. The Curio for me still remains the best way of doing that. You can put other things behind it. You know, if you're particularly worried about security or you want IPS done fast and the Curio can do it, you can put other things behind it. But in terms of what you're giving to the crew to manage their internet, that box is still, for me, what does it the best.
One of the things that every company should do is do their own research, because every company will adapt to their own products. Research is very important, especially when we're getting new things, new technologies coming in at a very fast pace. So if you just sit there and wait for something big to happen, you'll be behind. So it's very important that everybody does their homework, read data sheets, and if it's not your thing, you're not technical, that's fine, ask someone who is. We're in a very niche market, we're all collaborative, we all talk to each other, and I think the best thing to get out of an event like this is when you talk, you share ideas, you know, say what's the best version of your idea, and when you share, you collaborate, you get a better result. When you try to do it by yourself, it's usually just your idea and your opinion, rather than a more collective approach to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the nice thing about network design is that there are 100 different ways to design something.
Yeah, exactly.
The bad thing about network design is that there are 100 different ways to design
That's
things.
right, yeah. I'm not sure if that was yeah.
Yes, yeah. Can you tell, sometimes we can see on smaller vessels, 30, 40 meters, massive amounts of IT hardware is installed, because the enterprise versions, servers, multi-layer, different things. Is it really necessary, in fact, to have a server at all?
Decent question. I mean, I've had this conversation in different ways, lots of different times, and I mean, I'd go down to a boat and I'd consult for a boat, and then, you know, it would, you know, call it a 100-meter boat, and they're saying, we're a big boat, we need this and this and this and this and this, and you know, you try and make them think like, okay, your men's salon is bigger, your lazarette is bigger, your emails aren't bigger, your Excel files aren't bigger. There is a point of diminishing returns when it comes to how much or how complex the equipment that you're putting on board happens. With that said, when you're talking about, let's say, 30 to maybe up to 50 meter ranges, fundamentally, they still need the same general amount of stuff. And it's about, you know, they still need file services, they still need vessel information systems, they still need all of the control systems, and in many ways they need the same amount of internet connections that a bigger boat needs. So I think to a point, yes, you do still need that, but going back to what we were saying before, as we're now seeing this paradigm shift, and a lot of that can kind of start moving away, I see the complexity needs of the 30 to 50 reducing quite more substantially than I do to just an 80 to 100. Exactly. It's coming, it's not there yet. Realistically, it doesn't matter what size of boat it is, the data needs to be secure, it needs to be backed up, it needs to be redundant, and you need physical things to do that at the moment.
Any more questions, guys? Otherwise, we can wrap up. I think, thanks for that, guys. That was really interesting.
All right, thank you.